My name is Bill Boyce, Bishop Bill Boyce. I came to Kenya 5 years ago. I am from North Carolina, United States of America. I've been married to my wife for over 40 years. We have 3 children, and we came to Africa because God sent us here to teach about the end times, about the soon return of Jesus Christ. Before we left America, my life was involved in still doing mass design work. I was working as a contractor for various companies, from IBM to Intel to other companies you haven't heard of, and I enjoyed my work. I always enjoyed design, I always enjoyed layout, I always enjoyed working on the integrated circuits. It was a creative job, and it paid well, and it took care of our needs, took care of our children's needs. And then over the last few years, our children have been married. Carrie wasn't married yet, but when we came to Africa, Amy was married. She had 1 child when we came. She has 3 children now. Our son Jonathan got married before we came to Africa, and Carrie got married after she came to Africa. So she's got 3 children now also, and my son and his wife have no children yet. Growing up in America, it was like the TV series Leave It to Beaver. It was like a perfect life. We lived in a suburban neighborhood, we rode bicycles, we played with other kids in the neighborhood, and we just had fun. We'd play in the woods, we'd go hiking or climbing up around the area, we'd ride our bicycles all over, and we spent time going to church on Sundays and then spending time with other children. Everyone in America, probably 95% of children in America go to school, because in America our schools are paid for by the taxes, the property taxes and the government taxes pay for the schools, so there's no burden. Anyone who wants to go to school can afford to go to school from kindergarten through high school. College is extra. If you want to go to college, you have to pay for that. Your family saves and pays for it, or you pay for it by working while you go to school. Those are extra and those are optional. I went to a primary school called Oak Knoll School. It was a small school. It was first kindergarten through 6th grade, and it probably had about 600 students there, I would guess. And then all the teachers, obviously. It was mostly on one level, but then at the upper level at one end on a hill had the upper grades, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. All the beginning grades were downstairs, and in the basement they had a huge gymnasium where we go to play games and exercise, have different activities for working us out and getting energy out of the children, because children have a lot of energy. And I lived in Minnesota, which is the coldest state in America. And half of the year it's covered with snow. And so you can play outside, but you don't do a lot of activities outside. You go sledding or build snowmen or slide on the hills. There was a hill behind our school. We would all go up on the hill, and we would bring things to slide on, from wax cardboard from milk cartons, which were very quick. You would sit on them and you'd slide down the hill, and you'd see how far onto the playground you could go. That was the big thing, is trying to see how far you could go, how fast you could go. They also had gymnasium equipment. They had like swing sets and slides and merry-go-rounds. Those are the kinds of things they had for playing and having fun. They had open fields for like soccer, football, those kinds of things. And in the winter, they had a big area with a berm around it. It had a mound of dirt all the way around the edges, and they would fill it with water. When the winter came and everything got cold, they made a big skating rink, and so you could do hockey or other games, other skating type of activities on the ice. It's a lot different than here in Kenya. There's no ice except on Mount Kilimanjaro. My father was an auto mechanic. when I was a young child, he had a garage in Minneapolis where he worked on cars. But then later on, they built a giant garage on our property. We started in a one-level house. It was built into the side of a hill. And then later on, they built another story on top of it, which was at street level. So they rented out the apartment downstairs, and we all lived on the top floor. And then he would work on cars at home all the time. He had a huge driveway that would hold like 30 vehicles, and he had a garage that would hold 8 vehicles. And he was always busy repairing vehicles, fixing them, and for himself or for friends or for people who just needed auto repairs. And he made his living that way. He made money that way. My mother was at home taking care of the children. We had 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. My older sister, and then myself, and then my younger sister, and then my younger brother. My older sister was 3 years older than me, and then my younger sister was 1 year younger, and my brother was 3 years younger. So we had 4 children and 2 parents. My mother was just a housewife taking care of the children while we were young. And then later on, after we moved from Minnesota to California, because my father wanted to live near his parents and his brothers, then they bought a new house out there, and we lived in California in the Bay Area. My mother was, like I said, she was at home when we were young, but she went, when I was probably halfway through grade school, she started going to the University of Minnesota and getting a degree. She worked on getting a degree in social services. And from that, when we moved to California, she got a job in social services, taking care of children who were abused or children who were not being taken care of by their parents. So she worked for many years doing that. And my father, when we moved to California, he ended up working for the city, working for the sanitation department, maintaining vehicles, maintaining equipment, and he was always working on all kinds of machinery. He was very talented at that. When I was young, he built a dune buggy also, and we used that for riding around my uncle's farm. We would go and visit our relatives in central Minnesota probably every couple of weeks. My grandmother had a house on a lake, and we played in the lake. We swam, we learned how to fish and swim and boat, and I would go out canoeing. Or my uncle would take my cousins water skiing. There were many activities on the lake all the time. But my other uncles had farms. They raised maize, they raised corn. My one uncle and my cousins, they have thousands of acres of corn that they grow in Minnesota now, and it's mostly gets taken to an ethanol plant to be converted into fuel for vehicles now. But I know my relatives, my brothers and sisters still go and visit Upsala, Minnesota regularly. They visit with the cousins. My older sister moved back to that area recently after she divorced her husband, and she lives in that same community where we would go and visit all the time. All right, well, my father was in the military before I was born. And then I think my sister was born when he was in the military, but then I was born 3 years later. From the time I was young, he was always working as an auto mechanic. He had a small garage in downtown Minneapolis that I remember visiting. I remember seeing pictures of myself there, and he worked on cars there. And then I didn't understand until many years later why he didn't still have that garage, and I realized that he built his own garage and did his work at home instead after a while. But he always worked for himself, making a living repairing autos. I know that he always loved cars. As a young man, I know he worked on cars in his home on the farm, but he also bought motorcycles. He bought Honda motorcycles, and he would take us kids riding. He was also a pilot who trained other pilots when he was in the military for the Navy, and he had a plane that he used, and he would take us flying. We would go out in the airplane, and we would fly over the house and wave to our mom down below. And it was fun growing up because we got to do so many things. We got to ride motorcycles, we got to fly in airplanes. When we went to the lake where my uncle and my grandmother lived, they had motorboats and they had fishing boats and they had canoes, and we were able to just do so many things as children in America. We had a fun time, but we also learned to work hard. We saw our parents work hard, and we learned to work hard. They expected all of us to go to university, and we all did. We all went to, well, my brother and my younger brother and sister both went to junior college, which were able to get a 4-year degree there. My sister, I'm not sure which one she went to. I think she went to I think she went to the same college that they did, but I went to San Jose State University. They paid for my schooling, and I lived at home, and I drove to San Jose State University every day, and I would go to classes, I would study, and I would write my papers, and I would come home, and then I would just take care of everything I needed to do. I learned to work hard, both in school and once I started working. I worked hard in my jobs also, because I learned from them. They worked very hard. One of the best memories I have with my parents was every year we would take a vacation. There were 2 big vacations I remember mostly. I mean, other than going to local places. One year we went to Texas because my father, when he was in the military, he was based in Texas, and so they were familiar with the area. We went camping. My father converted a school bus into a camper. He took the seats and made beds out of them and made places for eating and for living. And we traveled from Minnesota to Texas. We went and stayed on an island called Padre Island, right by the ocean. And we got to see the area where he was in the military. And we got to eat something called Whataburgers, which are giant burgers as big as your head. It's a fast food chain, but they make very good burgers. But that trip to Texas was one of the funnest trips I remember. We went and stayed by the ocean for a week, and we just got to go swimming and got to go playing on the sand and just enjoying ourselves. The other big trip I remember was when we went to California, because we went to visit our grandparents. But on the way to California, we went to Yellowstone National Park, which is it's the first national park ever made. It's the first national park in America, and it has large animals. We went to California and we got to meet our grandparents for one of the first times. My grandmother and grandfather, my father's parents, they lived in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area in California. And my uncle lived nearby, and another uncle lived nearby. So eventually my parents decided we were going to move to California. But when we were in Minnesota, that was the second big trip, where we went and visited Yellowstone National Park and California. It was a wonderful memory. Actually, one of the things I remember most about my mom is how hardworking she was. Always taking care of our clothes, always taking care of our meals, always giving us, good things, wonderful Christmases, wonderful birthdays. But when she was studying and going to university, I know that she was still taking care of us, but she was busy studying too. And so that was one of the strong memories, is how hard she worked taking care of us and studying for her degree. So my wife and I met through church. We both went to the same church, and she was 7 years younger than I am. And so when I first met her, my first reaction was, who's this kid? I didn't know her. I met her, and she was the brother of a friend of mine. She was the sister of a friend of mine, and at that time she was a tomboy. She was not very womanlike. She was still a child, and she was probably 15 years old. But then a few years later, after she started growing up, then I began to become interested in her. And I actually dated her sister first, but then later on after I broke up with her sister, we ended up dating, and we had a lot in common. We always have had a lot in common. We have similar likes and similar interests, and so we dated for a year or two. No. Well, we dated before anything happened, but we ended up getting married fairly soon after because I was 27 years old and she was 20 years old, and so we ended up getting married I think within 6 months, because we had already been friends through the church and we'd known each other for quite a long time before we started dating. So for our wedding, we planned an outdoor wedding. I rented the Rose Garden in San Jose, and rented an area there, and we had an arch with flowers, and we had, I think, three bridesmaids and 3 groomsmen, and she picked her 3 best friends, and I picked my 3 best friends, and we had a wedding in the Rose Garden. It was beautiful. There were so many flowers around, and all kinds of roses, all kinds of flowers. But it was a beautiful day. My wife was beautiful in her dress with her veil, and we ended up having our whole church there, and family and friends, and we ended up getting married and driving off in her car. She had a Chevy Camaro that we left in. I had a Ford Mustang, basically, but we ended up getting married. It was a beautiful day, and it was a fun day. And then we went on a honeymoon to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. We spent almost a week there. It was during Thanksgiving break in America. We actually had our Thanksgiving dinner on the airplane on the way to Mexico. But then spent a week in Puerto Vallarta and on the coast of Mexico, and we had a lot of fun. We walked a lot of places, and we shopped, and we went swimming in the ocean, and we went swimming in the pool, and we just had a nice time. Got to know each other a bit, and then it was a tropical environment, and so it was a little different. There were like little lizards that walked on the walls in the apartment that we were staying in, but they helped keep the flies down, I guess. When I was a child, my dream career was to be a scientist. I was young, I was a kid, I didn't know what they meant. I knew it meant, scientific method and studying and learning about things, and I was always learning. But when I grew up and I was going to school, I decided I was going to go into pre-med. And then after 2 years, I realized I hated the sight of blood. So even though I had started pre-med, I had all my general training done, I decided I didn't really want to do medicine because I associated with surgery and other things. I didn't think about the fact I could have gone into many fields related to medicine without having to deal with blood. I could have done anything from being a pharmacist to being a pediatrician or who knows what else. There are many avenues I could have followed, but I was kind of dumb that way. I didn't really think it through. So when I decided I didn't want to finish pre-med, I decided to just get a liberal arts degree, and I planned on going to seminary. I was planning on being a pastor, and I was going to go to Fuller Theological Seminary in Southern California, and then that was the direction I was going. And then I ended up graduating from college, and then the Spirit of God spoke to my heart and told me that that was what I wanted to do. That wasn't what He wanted me to do. So He said, go out and get a job and get to learn to know people. Because I was kind of a private individual. I was kind of a shy individual. I didn't end up spending a lot of time with a lot of people. I had spent time with my friends, but if you're going to be a pastor, you need to learn to deal with people. You need to learn how to relate to people, and God knew I needed to learn that skill. My degree in college became liberal arts degree, and I was planning on becoming a pastor. I was planning on going to seminary, so I had a religious studies minor and a liberal arts major. I graduated from San Jose State University with a Bachelor of the Arts. And when I was getting ready to go to seminary, then I found out that wasn't what God wanted for me. And so I decided to just go find a job. As he told me, I made out a resume and I went looking for a job, and I ended up getting a job at a company that no one really knew about then. It was called Intel Corporation. Everybody knows who Intel is now. They're the ones who make the computer chips. They're the ones that make the microprocessors that go in everybody's computers. They are a very huge company now, but when I came to them, they were not big. They were mostly in Santa Clara, California, and that's where I worked. When I was in Intel, that's where I got further training. When I started out, I was a courier. I was for a special order group for tracking large dollar value orders so they wouldn't get lost or fall through the cracks. They needed special price breaks from presidents and vice presidents, and so I would hand carry them around to the different people that needed them. And while I was doing that, I got to see inside most of the buildings in Intel Corporation in Santa Clara, California. And I realized what I always liked to do. In high school, I enjoyed drafting. I enjoyed mechanical arts. I enjoyed the shop classes, woodworking and metalworking, those kinds of things. And I realized I liked doing work with my hands, but I also liked designing and drawing things. So I saw some people at Intel who were doing that type of work. They were drawing lines on paper. They were doing drafting type of work. And so I went and asked them, what is this and how do I get started in it? And so from that point, I went to a trade school and I learned the trade of mask design. Mask design is the process of designing all the layers that could put together to make an integrated circuit. From the layers for the transistors to the layers for the metals, everything that connects up the transistors to each other and make the circuit work, the bonding pads, the power supplies, the timing and the clock generators, everything that goes into making a chip. I learned the process of doing that at a trade school. And then when I finished that, Intel had an internal course where they picked 10 people to train about mask design, and I was one of the 10 people that got picked, partly because I had already been exposed to it, I think. But from that, I got pulled out of my class early to start doing real work on memory chips and other integrated circuits. And from there, it was a career that paid for my life, it paid for my family, it paid fairly well. And I was able to, my wife didn't have to work, she was able to stay home and take care of our children. She was able to teach them and homeschool them and train them and teach them our values. One of the things that we didn't really like about many parents in Silicon Valley, they would go out and both parents would have to work because of the cost of living. And so they would put their children in preschool or they'd put their children in daycare. And the thing that I disliked about daycare is the fact that other people are teaching your children their values, whereas you want them to learn your values. And as Christians, we wanted to teach godly values to our children. And so my wife, we were grateful that she was able to stay home to raise our children, to teach our children, to train our children, and even to homeschool our children. So they all had a good education. And the thing about homeschooling is the children were able to do the work in less time at home than they were able to do at school. But we also had a support group. We were part of what would it be called? We were part of an independent school. It was a private school, a Christian school that taught children. But the homeschool study group, we had a group of people that were also involved as a subgroup of that Christian school. And so our children got to do activities with other children, whether they're going on field trips, whether they're going to have sports activity or whatever. We had a group of other like-minded families that were able to get together, and we had friendship and we had relationship, and the kids had got to do the same things they did that they would in normal schools. And public schools. They would have all been involved with classrooms and classes that the children their same age. This way they were able to be involved in study groups and small groups that came from the same school. So we did that for many years. And then our children, they've all grown up and been married, but they all value their Christian educations. When I started looking for work, I was young and ignorant. And so I made out a resume. I made 10 copies and I went to 10 different businesses and dropped off the resumes. And so I shouldn't have gotten a job out of that because that's not very many applications. But Intel called me and they offered me a job. Like I said, I worked as a courier for the first year. And once I started working on mass design, they trained me in mass design. I went to the trade school, I learned mass design, but then they gave me additional training, and then they put me to work. And then as I was there was always continual training. But even on the side of that, I started going to another college called Mission College, which was near work. So I could work during the day, and then I would go to Mission College night classes, and I started taking engineering courses for design and for packaging and for various things. And so between the training I got on the job at Intel and the training I got at Mission College, I learned how to do the engineering. So I worked as a mass designer for like 45 years. And so I always continued to learn, but it was more of a mass design engineering training that I got. It was different than what most people think. When they think of engineering, they think of building bridges, or they think of designing machinery. They think of, there are many areas of engineering, but the field that I was in was a specific field that was limited to designing integrated circuits. And it had to do with integrated circuits, it had to do with circuit boards, it had to do with electronics. And so most people think when I tell them here that I was in electronics, they think I'm an electrical engineer who wires houses or works with transformers and power supplies and those kinds of things. But these were integrated circuits, so it was 1,000 times smaller. It was miniature power supplies, miniature circuitry, miniature everything. It's like the size of a computer chip is the size of my fingernail, and it has thousands and thousands and thousands of transistors. The big ones are the brains of the computers, the microprocessors. They're about the size of your thumbnail, and they have millions of transistors on them now. They've got 8 layers of metal, and they've got many more layers of design which go into them. What they do is they heat up the semiconductor and they diffuse different elements into it to make them more electrically conductive or less electrically conductive, more insulated. You can design miniature transistors, capacitors, amplifiers, all the different things that you would do for electronics, you do for semiconductors, which is miniature electronics, basically. Well, I enjoyed working for Intel. They always treated you well. They always had good benefits. It was always best when you could work direct for Intel, because when you're working for a company direct, then you get medical benefits, you get health, you get other benefits. And when you're working as a contractor, then even as a contractor, I worked for Intel, but I had to pay my own benefits and I had to take care of many things on my own. But as a contractor, they pay you at a higher level, so you can afford to pay for the extra things that you need to take care of yourself. So I worked for Intel Direct for almost 10 years, and then I worked for other companies like Texas Instruments and Philips and many other companies that also did integrated circuits. But even when I was working for other companies, many of the contracts that I did were still related to Intel. So up to half of my work was done directly or indirectly for Intel. But I always enjoyed when I was working at Intel. It's like one of the last jobs I was doing in Oregon. My wife and I traveled from North Carolina, which is on the East Coast, all the way to Oregon, which is on the West Coast. And I was doing a contract for Intel for a year and a half while my wife was getting some training for other things. But while we were there, I worked at Intel facilities, and I had the freedom to go around and see what was going on there. But mostly I was there to work on getting certain tips and certain processes done for them. And so I always enjoyed working for Intel, and they always treated me well. And then all the other companies I worked for, they were good too. In the semiconductor industry, in the electronics industry, they have fought very hard to try and keep unions out, because unions, while they're good for many things, for benefits for their employees and for people getting paid well, in electronics, the electronics companies have tried to give good enough benefits that they haven't had to fight the unions and deal with extra expenses related to unionizing. So I never had to deal with unions. My first job. My first job was as a shoe salesman. I don't remember how I got it. I remember it was in a mall near where we lived, and I would go to the mall and we would shop there and we would spend time with our friends there. But at some point I went in and asked about a job. Probably went to several stores, but I got a job at a Kenny shoe store, and I would spend the next probably 8 or 9 months selling shoes and trying shoes on people's feet and helping them find the style of shoes that they wanted, men, women, children. And it was an interesting job, and it took care of me while I was finishing high school. And then when I started college, I ended up getting another job for a theme park near where we lived. The theme park was called Marriott's Great America. It opened in 1976, which was the bicentennial, the 200-year anniversary of America's founding. So I worked for a theme park called Great America that had rides, it had food, it had activities, and I worked in the food services department. I worked at a kitchen where I helped prepare food for 10 different restaurants. And I did that for a year, and then after that I started working for the food warehouse, and I would pull all the orders for 30 restaurants. I would pull the food that needed to be delivered every night to all 30 restaurants, and I would load it all in trailers. And I worked in the warehouse. I'd pull the orders and I'd load them in the trailers, and then I would send crews out, and they'd go deliver it to this restaurant here or that restaurant there. And all the restaurants got stocked with fresh food every night. I would take the orders, and then I would also do the inventory in the warehouse about once a week so that they could reorder whatever was needed. It was an interesting job. Well, it was minimum wage. It was probably $3.25 per hour, I would think. And it was only a part-time job. It was evenings after school and on weekends. So maybe 20 hours a week at the most, because I was still going to high school at that point. Yeah. So when did I learn about Kenya? I mostly learned about Kenya from my daughter Carrie, because she's been interested in Kenya for decades, from the time she was a child. She had a video that she played. It talked about the lions and the tigers in Kenya. I remember as a child we had the show called Daktari, which was about a lion and some people who were working in Kenya. I think it was a veterinarian who took care of large animals. But I didn't even realize, I knew Mount Kilimanjaro was in Africa, but I didn't realize it was in Kenya until after I got here. My daughter was always interested in Kenya, and then as my wife got called into ministry, then she was wanting to come to Africa. She felt God was calling her to Africa. and I was busy doing my master's design job, and while I was doing my job, my wife was getting training from the Lord for coming to Africa. But then as it drew closer to the time to come here, then it became clear, God made it clear to me and to my wife that we were both supposed to be coming to Africa. And in Ruth's heart, it was Kenya. I didn't know where we were going until they talked to me and said that's where they wanted to go. But I knew my daughter had always been interested in it. I came along for the ride. So I learned mostly about Kenya when I got here. I knew a few small things about it before, but I've learned more about it since coming. I thought it was interesting that my wife felt that God was calling her to Africa. I knew that I was approaching my retirement age, and we were going to have to decide what we were going to do in our retirement. But I felt, as I thought about it and I prayed about it, that I could tell that God was leading me to come with my wife to Africa and to Kenya, and it became the next focus for the next stage of our life, the next season of what God is doing with us. So we came here to teach about Jesus Christ, teach about the end times, teach about salvation, and teach about the return of the Lord. Because the focus of my wife's ministry is the soon return of the Lord Jesus Christ. The rapture is coming, and it's coming quickly. It's coming very soon, sooner than people think. And so we came to Africa. We've been here for nearly 5 years now, and we've been building a ministry called the Last Call Ministries, because we feel God has said this is the last call before Christ returns. We're out of time. Jesus has said he's coming back. He needs to come back for his church. And then we also have a church that we started here called God's Heart Ministries, God's Heart Church, because that's the name that God gave my wife for her church. And so that's here in Maluki, near Bungoma, and we've been doing this for 4.5 to 5 years. In order to prepare to come to Africa, we thought we would have to get many things ready, but God said that we needed to hurry. God told my wife that we needed to hurry. So we sold many things that we had. We gave away many things that we had. We sold our vehicles. We sold anything extra that we didn't want to keep. We weren't going to keep things in storage in America because it was time for the next phase in our lives where we're coming as missionaries in Africa, and we would not be living in America any longer. We came here to live. We go back to America to visit every year to a year and a half because I need medicines that I can't get here in Africa. And so we have to go back to get my medicines. I have a disease called Addison's disease, which could kill me if I don't take my medications. So that's why we go back. But we're here to stay. We're here to work. We're here to pray. We're here to help bring people with the Lord when he returns. Yeah, well, Addison's disease is a fairly rare disease. It's like 1 in 200 people or something has it. But John F. Kennedy had it. Everyone knows who he is from the 60s. But I never knew that until I got Addison's disease and found out about it. What it does is it affects my immune system. It basically it confuses my system and causes everything in my body to be upside down and backwards. And so unless I take my medications every day, within a week to 2 weeks, I could die, because it helps, the medicines help keep things running right in my body. If they're not running right, then I would waste away and I would die. And I know there was a time recently where my medications were not in the right balance, and I was trying to figure out why I was feeling so sick, why I was feeling so tired, why I was feeling so weak. And when that got straightened out, I regained my strength and my stamina, and I found out how much it can affect me if I'm not careful. Oh. The final days when we were getting ready to come to Africa were just too busy. They were very busy. We didn't even, I don't think the last night we slept hardly at all because we had so many things to finish, so many details to take care of, so many things to finalize. And it was just continually taking care of the last things, everything on our list, everything that was needed, between making sure we had our clothes and other materials packed that we wanted to bring with us, to giving away the last few things to our family. It's like we had boxes of Christmas ornaments that we would use every year at Christmas on our Christmas tree in America. But because we had to get rid of everything and move on to the next stage in our lives, we gave those away to our children. Our children went through all of the boxes and they each took a third of them. It was just everything from packing our Bibles and packing our clothing and packing snacks for the trip, packing backpack for the airplane, packing everything that we needed. And the thing is, when we were packing and needing to get the final things done, we knew we had a weight limit on our bags. You could carry 3 suitcases each, but the suitcases could not be more than 50 pounds each. And so you had to take what you needed and then take a few more things that you wanted, but it all had to fit within 50 pounds per bag. And if it was over that, you had to take it out, or you had to put it in a box and save it for when you go visit America again, because we gave nearly everything away. We kept a few small things, which is kind of a shame, because my wife and I have been married for 40 years, and you have a lot of things, a lot of memories, a lot of special things you've received from family or that you've gotten and you've kept for yourselves to build a life. And now you're basically giving away all of your old life and starting a new life. It's like day and night. Everything's done and now it's time to move on. It was very busy and a little bit frustrating because there was just so much to do, and it hurts to get rid of things that you would like to keep, but you can't. No, we knew it was the right decision. It's just a matter of getting everything done and being prepared. It was also the uncertainty of coming to a new land, coming to visit a person that Ruth had been in touch with, Bishop Peter Simeon. She had been talking with him for the last year before we left, online and on phones. And we were putting our trust in him to help take care of getting us prepared out here, because we had heard a lot of good things and some bad things about Africa. A lot of people want to take advantage and want to especially take advantage of Mzungus, who are white people. They think that white people are rich because so many people are so poor here in Africa. They think every Mzungu has loads of money, even if you don't. And so you come here and then you find out too many people just want to take anything they can from you, if possible. But you have to find someone who's trustworthy, someone who's reliable, someone who is honest. And Peter Simeon is honest, and he's helped us. He's taken care of us and helped us for the last 5 years that we've been here. He's been a good friend, and he's been a partner in the Last Call Ministries. He's our African representative for the Last Call. It was harder than I thought it was going to be in some ways, because even though Kenya is a well-developed country, some things about Kenya are still like the third world. It's like coming to Africa, coming to Kenya. Many things about Kenya are nice, but many things are poorer than you would expect. It's like going back 100 years in America to the Wild West, where it's like people take the law in their own hands if they want to. Where it's like you don't know who you can trust sometimes, because there's a vigilante justice that is done by the boat drivers and by the police and by other people here. The police in Kenya they are not like the police in America. In America, the police are your friend and they're there to help you. In Kenya, the police want to take what they can get a lot of times too, because they don't have a lot of money and they take advantage of people driving autos and people on the road, and they try and basically extort money to help them to live, which is a shame that they can't just be the protectors that you expect police to be. Yes, Kenyan hotels, the hotels are overall nice. The first hotel that we went to, we had made a reservation at a hotel before we came to Kenya, and when we got there, it was far below what the pictures showed online. It was a very poor quality hotel. In fact, we didn't even stay there that night, and there was no way we could get our money back from them. So it was just take the loss, because the first hotel was very subpar. It was not worth staying there at all. We had to find another place. But most hotels are decent. Most hotels are nice. Most hotels are fine. It's different though, because it's like in America, you have a bathroom. You have a bathroom, and in the bathroom you've got the toilet, you've got the bathtub or shower, and you've got the sink. And here, you've got one room, basically. It's the toilet, and it's the shower. There's a sink outside that room. But it's like, if you're going to take a shower, you just close the lid on the toilet, and you turn the water on, and you close the door, and that's your shower. The shower is the same room as the room where the toilet is. The whole thing is lined with tile, and so it's fine, but it's not what we're used to. It's not what we expect. It's just different. But it works. Everything works here, and everything is fine. When you come to the country, and you live in the country, you find out there's no shower. I mean, you have a room that you can go into, just like in the frontier days, in the pioneer days, they had a basin and they had a jug. And basically you take a basin and a jug and a big jug of water, and you just use the basin to wash, and you take the jug and pour it over your head. That's your shower. It's not a shower room where you can go turn the water on, where you have hot and cold water like you're used to in America. Here it's just cold water, and you pour it over your head, and you wash, and then you rinse off, and it's just different. Kenya is not developed in the same way America is. In the cities, they have the shower rooms, which are fine. They have toilets, which you can sit on. Here, you don't even have a toilet in the country. It's a pit toilet, basically, like we have in some campgrounds in America, the less developed ones. But it's a hole in the ground, and you squat over it, and you take care of your business, and that's all it is. That's the way it is in most places. Even in cities, most of the toilets are ground level. They're not a seat you can sit on like in America. So it's an adjustment, but it works. It's okay. It's just the way it is here, and you learn to deal with it. It's not a problem. It's just a little bit of a surprise the first time you see it, because it's different than you expect. In America, every hotel, every place that you go to sleep has a separate bathroom, separate shower, separate everything. And it's all very nice, it's all clean and taken care of. But this is the country, this is a less developed country, and it's life. It's the way life is here. You cook over a fire. You don't have a stove most places. You cook over a campfire. They put their pot on 3 stones, and they feed the wood in from the 3 sides, and you cook your food there. And that's just the way it is. It's a different country. It's a different culture. It's a different way of living. And that's what it takes. That's what works here. And it's fine. It's just you learn to deal with the differences in life. Wow. The journey from Nairobi to Nyangali. The first time, it was very long. It's like a 10-hour drive, but it took twice as long because our driver hadn't slept, and he wasn't able to keep driving. My daughter actually drove for part of the trip, but we had Peter Simeon, who is our friend here, he came with with like 8 people. He brought all these people with him, and they came to Nairobi, which is 10 hours away from Bungoma, but it took a long time because first we got there, we got out of the airport, we met them. When we walk out of the airport, you don't meet people in the airport like you do in America. You meet them outside the airport. So once we met him and his wife and the friends that he brought, then we had to get into taxis or cars, and they had one vehicle that they brought, and we had to use a taxi for the rest of us, I guess. But we went to what we call a hotel, what they call lodging. We spent the night, and then we prepared to go home the next day. And so that was nice. We were able to unwind a little bit before taking the trip home. But when they planned the trip home, then we left late in the day. We drove through the night. Peter had people waiting. He had a whole bunch of, the rest of his family, a whole bunch of other people waiting in his house. And they had planned a meal for when we arrived. But as far as the timing of arriving, it wasn't set up as well as it could have been because it took forever to drive across the country. And we arrived like 4 in the morning, I believe it was, and they had reheated the food several times because they kept expecting us and kept expecting us. So the food was overcooked and dry, and it was just a matter of meeting everyone, meeting the family. And Peter has like 12 people in his family, and then that's just his immediate family. But then there are all the relatives and all the friends. He had like 25 people waiting to meet us, along with the 10 people he'd brought to the airport in Nairobi, along with the 3 of us that came. And so when we got here, we were very tired and it was very late, and we went into his big front room and we all sat there and we met everybody and we had the meal. It just was a very, very, very long night driving across the country. Driving across the country is more stressful in Africa than it is in America, because in America you've got all the big open highways and you drive at a certain pace. You've got speed limits and you drive 70 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour, and you go where you want to go and then you arrive. But here, they've got all these trucks that drive as fast as they want to drive. You'd have to go at the speed of traffic. There's not a speed limit. If people want to drive fast, they drive fast. If people want to drive slow, they hold up traffic. But everybody drives bumper to bumper as fast as they possibly can. And so it's not as peaceful as driving in America. When you get on the road, you take your life in your hands. If you ride in a car or a small van, so many people get killed because trucks crash into them because people are driving. Not everybody drives safely. Some people are driving tired, some people are driving late, some people are not ready, and there's always accidents. You always see vehicles on the side of the road that have been wrecked because of an accident. Even the trucks that have gone off the side of the road because their driver fell asleep or their brakes failed or who knows what. There's just many accidents along the highway, and usually it's just 2 lanes each way, and like I said, they drive as fast as they possibly can, as close as they possibly can. In America, you're taught to drive safely. You're taught to preventative, be careful and drive safely. Leave extra room so that there's room to stop. They don't leave stopping distance. If something happens to the car in front of you, you don't have time to stop because you're following too close. That's just the way it is here. And it's unfortunate. Too many people get hurt or killed because of this. You've seen it on other shows in America, like never mind. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of the show, and I don't remember what it was. It's the one with the British drivers. They come to Africa. You see them driving in Africa, and you can tell it's different. But coming here is a different thing. Seeing it for yourself. My daughter Amy, when she came to America to visit, coming from Kisumu to here, she was grateful to get out of the car. She was shocked at how everybody drives here.